Hello, everybody, and welcome to another, I guess, retrospective in one way of my new game, Another Day in Paradise. Similar to the video I did on Chicken Fillet Rolls, just want to chat about Bitsy, which is the engine I use for this game, and also my general feelings on the whole process and stuff like that. So this is my itch page in front of you. As of right now, when I'm recording, I haven't released Another Day in Paradise, but it's pretty much there. It's with playtesters at the moment, finalizing everything, and yeah, it's in really good shape. So what is Bitsy? Bitsy is basically a game engine for very small games. Well, not necessarily very small, but just small games in general. It's not high scope or anything like that, and because you have limited functionality. I say it's not small because technically you could add scenes and keep adding scenes for ages and ages and ages. Even my game is around 30 minutes, which is quite long in terms of Bitsy games. I really wanted to test out a different format from my previous game, Chicken Fillet Rolls, which was made in Twine, which was more interactive fiction based. This one in Bitsy is more like, quote unquote, a real game. I say that very loosely because, games are subjective. But what I mean is that in this game, you can do things like actually move your character around and do stuff like that. You're still quite limited to a few things. So, for example, you can just pick up items, you can walk around, you can't jump or anything, you can unlock doors and stuff like that. So it is quite limited in that way, but I think that's what's really cool about it, is because it gets you to focus your mind on what can be. As well as that, it has a system where it just uses 3 colors per area, and that's a cool and challenging restriction at times. And then just to say too, Bitsy has a thing where you can add things called hacks to it to give you a bit more functionality. However, for my game, I decided to use 0 hacks. So this is a game made in Bitsy vanilla, essentially. Everything is done in your browser, which I personally am not a fan of. I would rather I had a desktop application, partly because it glitched out quite a lot. Not to the extent where I was worried about any data loss, but more that you had to keep on refreshing to go back to what you were doing, and that was kind of annoying. Whereas I feel like a desktop version would be more stable. And of course, like if you wanted to do a new game, which I'm too scared to click right now, there's no kind of you have to make sure you save your data and everything like that. Or else you click new game and start afresh. So I prefer Twine in that way because you're able to see all the projects you're working from, and you're able to click in and out of them very easily. But this is a different type of project. It serves very much a different purpose. So my game, as I mentioned, is called Another Day in Paradise. It's essentially a small adventure game. I don't want to say too much in case you haven't played it yet. Actually, you know what? No, this is the video for spoilers. What am I talking about? This is the spoiler video. So if you haven't played it, head down to the link below and go play it now. This is your warning. Get out of here. Get out of here. You shouldn't be. There's a reason why I'm saying this, by the way. Okay. I'm presuming you're gone now. If you're still here, well, it's your own fault. Okay, so Another Day in Paradise is, on the surface, just an adventure game. You're a happy little person wandering around a town. The thing is, that's not entirely true. This game came to be because I've been feeling quite down about a few things, and I came up with this idea of kind of like I wanted to play with the idea of something mundane versus something kind of surreal and kind of have some absurdity going to it too. Because for people who live with like anxiety and depression, like myself, it could look like the happiest day on earth. It could be sunny, it could be whatever, and you could be going through a lot. So this game kind of challenges that, where on the surface it is just, as I said, a very kind of happy-go-lucky game. But there are certain things and certain elements that switch up, as well as you get hints throughout that nothing in this town seems quite right. Something is off. Little triggers here and there switch things up. So I'm super happy with how it all played out. As I said, this is now going to contain spoilers for the entire thing. You can see all my scenes are here. And that was an interesting thing to have to build as well. Because art is not my forte, as in this kind of art. I love painting IRL in acrylic and stuff like that. This was quite a challenge too because I also had to learn the Bitsy engine as well as doing all the art to do things. So for example, the tiles that you kind of see in the background here, I made all of these from scratch. There's a lot of them. Sometimes you had to, I use like shapes where your mind just filled in the gaps. So for example here, like here's the outline of a fridge and it's using negative space and stuff like that. And sometimes you just kind of like get the impression of what something could be, but isn't quite the exact shape of an object. For example, this grass is clearly like, you know, there are many ways to do grass, but giving it a bit of movement to make, you know, to make it look like there's waving grass in the air and this really giant telephone. So tiles are interesting because tiles you can replay, like you can place them as many times as you want. Sprites, on the other hand, represented by the screen here, they can only be placed once, which honestly is kind of a bit annoying. I wish that you could multiply them because that would have made my life a bit easier because I had to keep on remaking them for each section. However, I understand why, because, you know, with different characters, you want like different, you can get different dialogue here and there. It is a bit tedious, and you also should make sure you label properly. For example, here I have labeled, you can see like 2s and 1s and 3s. That tells me which area this sprite is in, and that is useful to me. Another thing that's kind of annoying is, say for example, like this teapot over here, and I was on like, if I accidentally clicked that teapot sprite somewhere else, it would move it from here and insert it into another scene. There's no way that I could see that you could lock it in place, and that was irritating because too many times did I accidentally move sprites and then be like, oh, now I have to remember where it moved from in the first place. So that was a bit tedious. Items, I had a few items. These are kind of special items that I used where these are actually dialogue triggers. You can do dialogue triggers when you transition from different areas, but I found that if I wanted something for sure to trigger, these buttons as such were much better. So for example, let's just do this for a second so you can get an idea. So for example, like, you can see a button like right here, and that button will trigger because I walk into it. You have to trigger because that's the only way out of the room. So I found that useful to kind of like go through certain areas. So here, that's actually a bit of magic. I don't know if you saw that straight away. So I walked out of the house, and then you can see the outside of the house here. Bit of magic. That's actually, I just duplicate. I had to duplicate the scene and then build over the second scene. So it looks like I've gone to, like I've just barely stepped outside, but in fact I had to build 2 separate scenes to do that. And I had to do that for a lot of spaces. Specifically, I wanted to do it here because I built in the lock mechanic. So you can't go back in currently because it's locked. There's a lot of mechanics that I learned. I'm sure there's loads of other things that I didn't even try. But in so much as I did things to do like picking up items and puzzles to do with that. And then I used like some morphing features to access different types of branching dialogue and stuff like that. So I'm really happy with how things played out in the end, and I think it's a strong enough concept as well once you get into it. So as I mentioned, you're restricted in terms of color. However, you can pick your own palette of the 3 colors, and I just chose these colors because it kind of suit the atmosphere that I'm going for. When I was playtesting, one of my playtesters has a type of color blindness and pointed out some changes that I could do. So I just made sure that there was some high contrasting colors throughout to make it a bit easier. Obviously, everyone's color blindness isn't the same, but it was really useful to at least do one particular change to help out with that. Speaking of playtesters, it's so important to get feedback on all your work, and don't be precious about it either. Also, get people to playtest early on. It can often be a bit too late when they playtest way too far towards the end of it. So I had playtesters access the first section, the second section, and the third section, and I was able to tweak quite frequently throughout that. and that was really useful. And I did the same thing for my other game, Chicken Fillet Rolls. Really important that I had play testers to check things out. There's always probably going to be a few issues here and there with a final game, but as long as nothing's breakable, then you're doing pretty well overall. So yeah, as I said, the art probably was the slowest aspect of it because I had to build every single room from scratch, and that kind of was very, very slow at times. And then there was just a lot of logic that went on because, for example, I have a kind of like a crossroads here, and I had to make sure that everything moved from different sections that visually also made sense. And it's also important, and we're mentioning that if you have a specific vision, you don't have to take everyone's feedback. Some people's feedback is nice and it's great and useful, and sure, yeah, if you can see it, it's improvement. Absolutely go for it. But if you have a particular vision in mind, then you don't have to switch up because someone says that they prefer something. And I think that's really important. And that's why throughout this, I had my GDD, which is my game design doc, which is something you can access by just clicking if you go through to my game page, and it's linked there. And my other game design doc for Chicken Fillet Rolls is also available. So I was tracking everything I wanted to do with the game, the experience, and what I envisaged for my final vision here, because it just kept me on track, and this is what I wanted to achieve. So in terms of Bitsy, I do recommend it as an excellent game engine to make small games in. Obviously it's restrictive and there are a few niggling things that I don't like, but I'm really proud of what I was able to make, and I think it's really accessible once you get into it. I have more resources in my GDD as well, but overall it was straightforward. I'm sure you can do much more with the Bitsy hacks. I just didn't want to go down that route because I want to study a few more other engines and move on to other projects. I spent a good few weeks working on this one. I think about close to a month in total, and yeah, it was a lot of fun to learn and get poking at little things and just thinking different ways in terms of color and music and movement. And I went very light on the puzzles in this because for me, the more interesting aspect for this entire game was actually what was happening in the town. And that for me was where I wanted my focus to be instead of heavy puzzle elements. So they should be relatively okay for people to figure out. I had to tweak some things because one thing was a bit too cryptic. So I've made it a bit more obvious now. And I'm okay with that because, as I said, I want to focus on the town and that's my vision. So I'm very okay with the puzzles not being too complex or anything. But yeah, you should check out Bitsy. It's free to poke at. And yeah, thanks for listening.